Chapter 31. Winding Down. The following day, they sat around a meeting table in Harry's office. The six of them, Harry, Ron, Hermione, Draco, Lydia, and Ambrose, plus Lydia's chicken, all sat in a comfortable moment of quiet. The wood panelling glowed with sunlight streaming in from the high windows. Magical maintenance had given their windows good weather to welcome Harry back to the office. Specks of dust danced in the rays, unaware of their magical source. "Thank you," Harry almost whispered. "You've all saved my life, one way or another, over the past days, weeks even." "It's an occupational hazard of knowing you, Harry," Draco grinned. A ripple of laughter brought some energy back to the gathering. "Tell me about it," Ron complained. He turned to Lydia. "Thank you, Lydia," Ron said, "for saving us all." Lydia blushed. Hermione, seated beside her, leaned to her side and gratefully bumped shoulders with her. The chicken nuzzled Lydia's chin with the top of its head. "I don't even know how I did that," she fretted. "It's all so new, and it's weird seeing it from the inside, not watching all of you do it." "It's quite scary when your magic starts coming out," Hermione comforted her. "My parents are muggles, so I had no idea what was going on or what to expect. But we're here for you, and Hogwarts will teach you everything you need to know." Draco flashed his eyebrows and nodded. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Harry warned. "I'm not convinced we've made the right decision on what should happen about Lydia's position yet." "Well, what else should happen, Harry?" Hermione demanded. "She's magical now, and Hogwarts will teach her the control she needs." She glanced at Ambrose. "I think she will make an excellent student." "It's not that simple, Hermione," Harry explained. "After the rumours that were put about, the scaremongering about muggles turning magical." "Oh, Harry," she scolded. "She's simply another muggle-born discovering she's a witch. Draco and Neville and Hagrid, McGonagall too, they'll all watch out for her. What else would you have her do?" "I don't know, but—" "Harry," Ron interrupted. "McGonagall and Kingsley have already discussed this, and agreed that Lydia belongs at Hogwarts. Nobody but us and some of the Hogwarts staff know about Lydia's story." Draco shifted in his seat. "That's not strictly true, Ron. The Death Eaters we caught are in Azkaban," Ron finished. "No, Draco's right," Harry pronounced. "Azkaban allows visitors. Messages can be passed. We have no idea how many people know about Lydia." "That makes dear Lydia's position sound somewhat precarious, admittedly," Ambrose said. "I would sleep a great deal more easily, knowing she was surrounded by talented and well-disposed witches and wizards, in a contained and controlled environment such as, say, Hogwarts." Harry pursed his lips and frowned for a few moments. "I suppose the minister himself is behind the idea." "Ack," the chicken opined. "There was something else the minister spoke to me about," Hermione continued in a hesitant tone. "He would like me to, position myself to be the Minister of Magic over the next few years." "Well," Ambrose beamed, "you have an exemplary background, Hermione. You have always contended that more should be done about fairness and equality. The house elves, for instance. This would be an unparalleled opportunity." "Everyone knows and respects you, Hermione," Draco enthused. "To our generation, you're every bit as much of a legend as Harry. And Ron, of course," he added. Ron frowned, but said nothing. "Well," Hermione mused, looking at Ron. "It is a good idea, Hermione," he agreed after a pause. "People respect you. You have a way of getting them to do the right thing." He turned to Harry. "And if there is trouble brewing, we need someone the wizarding world will rally around." "I'm worried Lydia's real story might still get around," Harry said. "Even if we pretend she has just come into her magic like any other muggle-born witch, rumours will start, and she'll be singled out." "You survived being singled out, Harry," Hermione pointed out. It's not only the similarities that worry me, Harry explained. Nobody has come into their magic this way before. Well, not for thousands of years, I understand. We have no idea how it will affect you, Lydia. That's what worries me. There are plenty of us to watch over her, Harry, Draco reminded him. Who did you all turn to when you wanted to know about the old magic? Lydia can come to me any time if she needs help. And her friend Tessa will be a prefect, maybe even head girl, for her first year. Don't make me get McGonagall involved, Harry Potter, Hermione warned. Harry sighed and smiled. All right, you lot, stop ganging up on me, he laughed. Lydia will be fine at Hogwarts, and Hermione will eventually become my boss. But you might have to help me pull some strings, Hermione. Lydia hasn't shown up on the trace as being magical. Interesting, said Draco. And worrying, Ron added. What if the Death Eaters do manage to perform the rituals and make more Muggle wizards? How will we know? A good reason for Lydia to be in a safe environment where I can study how her magic manifests itself, said Draco. If Lydia will help me, perhaps we can develop a version of the trace, which includes her and any other newcomers with her kind of magic. Hermione made to speak. You say I might eventually be your boss, Harry. Well, Kingsley is going to appoint me to head of magical law enforcement, so I will be kind of your boss in a few weeks. On a day-to-day level, Ron clarified. Harry still has a direct line to the Minister on important stuff. Ambrose had been holding his hand up for a while. The others finally noticed. Is there something you wanted to ask, Ambrose? Harry inquired. If Lydia is to attend Hogwarts, could you please confirm that it will not be necessary for you to make her mother and me forget all about her? No, of course not. What do you take us for? It is simply that when we embarked on this incomparable series of adventures, you did intimate that you would probably be required to make us forget. The great Lady McGonagall did not appear entirely certain on the matter, and I have been privy to some remarkably sensitive information. Ambrose, you've done so much for us all, said Hermione. We would never have solved this case without you and Lydia. In fact, we would never have known anything about it until it was too late. Well, to be absolutely fair, we were, in turn, tricked into being involved. It could also be argued that we were culpable for Harry being trapped and incarcerated at Throckley, Ambrose noted. Whatever, Hermione brushed off his objection with a warm smile. You are part of our world now. Anyway, we don't split up families because one member turns out to be magical. There's a bunch of controls and stuff for Muggle family members, Ron explained with his usual level of clarity. But basically, you're not going to tell anyone because they'd think you were mad and lock you up. I have managed to avoid such a fate thus far, Ambrose quipped. I can officially confirm that you and Lydia's mother will keep your memories intact, Harry smiled. Thank you for that, Harry, my dear boy, Ambrose said with some relief. And the chicken too? Lydia grinned. A special dispensation for the chicken, Harry smiled. She has been amazing. Maybe we should make her an aura. Ack, the chicken complained. And perhaps she is ready for the quiet life, Ambrose suggested. Someone from the ministry will visit Lydia's mum and explain all the procedures for Lydia going to Hogwarts, Harry began. Hopefully in such a way that she will not feel inclined to rip off my head, Ambrose said. No promises, Harry smiled, especially if you keep calling me your dear boy. Never again, old man. Dreadfully sorry, Ambrose replied with mock earnestness. Harry grimaced and shook his head. I'll see what we can do for you to avoid physical violence from Lydia's mum. For now, I suppose you'd both like to get back to some sort of normality. Not really, said Lydia. Good gracious now, normality? Would not know what to do with it, dear boy. Your sublime head Oranus, I mean to say, Ambrose added. Back home, at least, Harry explained. I'll get a driver to take you there. Come with us, please, Lydia begged. Just for a visit. The members of the gathering looked at each other. I have to get back to Hogwarts, Draco explained. And I do need to see Astoria and Scorpius first. But I'm sure the others could... Seems good to us, Harry, said Ron, smiling at Hermione. Let's go then, said Harry, standing up and pushing his chair back. The taxi pulled up outside Ambrose's house. They all got out, which involved the usual chicken juggling between Ambrose and Lydia. Ambrose went around to the driver's window to pay. Don't be silly, sir, the driver smiled. Mr. Potter's office have taken care of everything. Well, thank you enormously for the lift, Ambrose answered him. And thank you, Harry. The work of a moment, sir, the cabbie chipped in. I assume the rest of you can make your own way home. Have a good day. The five of them waved the cabbie off. The taxi turned at the end of the street and disappeared before reaching the main road. Magic, eh? Ambrose shrugged at Lydia. And I'm going to school to learn it. Lydia bounced up and down. What? No, I meant a happy taxi driver. Definitely a magical moment. Harry and Ron chuckled. Lydia looked ready to scold him when they heard a woman's voice hailing them. Mr. Ward! Mr. Ward! Betty, how are you? Ambrose smiled and bowed slightly. These are our friends, Harry, Ron, and Hermione. Hello, and I'm well, thank you. But I'm afraid I have some bad news, his neighbour said. Bad news? Ambrose asked. I haven't seen Jacaranda for quite a while. Days and days. I don't know what has happened to him. He never missed a meal, and then not a sign of him. Oh dear, Ambrose said, though he did not sound overly concerned. I fear the worst, Mr. Ward, she interrupted. Oh, you've got a chicken. Ambrose turned to Harry, Ron, and Hermione. Jacaranda is my cat. Betty has been kindly looking after him while we have been away. Wherever Jack has got to, Betty, that is his affair, said Ambrose, facing her. I'm sure you have done everything you reasonably could. Cats are a law unto themselves, after all. Cats will be cats, as they say. We cannot look after them all of the time, and they would hate it if we tried. And it's Ambrose, as I keep telling you. By this time, they had gradually migrated to Ambrose's front door, and his keys were in his hand. Excuse us, please, Betty, Ambrose explained. We have had a long journey, and as you have pointed out, we do have a chicken. Lydia's eyes were looking red-rimmed, and she was squeezing the chicken to her chest. Hermione laid a soothing hand on her shoulder. Yes, of course, Mr. Ambrose, Betty faltered. I have looked everywhere. I'm quite certain you have, Betty. It was exceedingly kind of you to look after him for so long. If he turns up, or if I find anything out, I'll be sure to let you know as soon as possible. Thank you, Ambrose, she smiled wanly and turned to leave. Ambrose and Lydia stepped into the house, and Ambrose dropped their bags to one side of the hall. Jack, Lydia croaked. Her eyes glistened. The chicken looked up at her and rested its head on her collarbone. Cats will be cats, Ambrose reassured her. That can be a dangerous way to live. They shed their jackets and moved into the lounge. He was not a young cat any more, Ambrose continued, partly to Lydia and partly in explanation to their friends. He has lived with me since you were tiny, Lydia. And do not forget that cats have 9 lives. Perhaps he has decided to live another life, somewhere. The chicken peered at Ambrose. Lydia looked up at him, her eyes welling with tears. Hermione hugged her from one side. Maybe there's a spell that could bring him back, Lydia suggested in a tiny voice, turning to Hermione. Ambrose shook his head. I do not think so, Lydia. If Jack has gone, that is probably how it should be. Fairy tales are full of people trying to cheat death, and it never works out well. Actually, he added, a lot of horror stories start out that way too. Harry made a kind of strangled cough. Ron's eyebrows soared. Hermione glowered towards them, before turning back to Lydia and telling her, Ambrose is right, of course. You can't cheat death. The way to win is to live a full life. I'm sure Jack did that. Jacaranda Puss may have seemed as though he was on a spa holiday all the time recently, Ambrose chuckled. But when he was younger, he was a legend. Well, at least to all the local cats. And he was the scourge of local wild birds and small vermin. The chicken scowled at him. Might I offer anyone a cuppa? Ambrose asked. Let me, said Harry, drawing out his wand. Tea? Coffee? They agreed on tea, plus a hot chocolate with marshmallows for Lydia. With a flick of his wand, Harry produced 5 steaming mugs. Hermione tutted. Yes, I know, Harry sighed. You would have produced a fancy tea service with cakes and tiny sandwiches. But don't forget, I'm in Aura. Lots of late nights and cold stakeouts. This is absolutely appropriate, Harry, Ambrose thanked him. Might I impose upon you for a bowl of water and some food for our small feathery guest? Before Harry could move, Hermione had whipped out her wand, producing 2 fine porcelain bowls in her other hand. As she placed them on the floor, they expanded and filled, one with water, the other with mixed corn and seeds. Lydia put down the chicken, who lightly pecked Hermione's toe, sipped some water, and then tucked into the corn. Hogwarts, Lydia began. You should receive a letter by owl in the next few days, Harry told her. I was thinking, she continued, a lot of the students have pets there. Familiars, Hermione explained. Owls, rats, cats, lizards or toads. Chickens? Asked Lydia. I'm not sure that would work, Harry mused. Think of the practicalities, Lydia dear, Ambrose warned. Presumably there are no dogs because they require regular attention, and the presence of so many cats would hardly be a restful environment for a chicken. She could live with the owls, Lydia suggested. Owls are hunters, Ambrose pointed out, and magical messengers, not paranormal poultry like our beloved hen. Well, Lydia explained, our chicken's very magical. Without her, we would never have managed. She would be the perfect familiar for me. Ambrose frowned and stroked his beard for a moment before turning to their guests. Would one of your professors be able to turn our dear chicken into, say, a cat? I think Professor McGonagall, Harry began. Oh, come on, Hermione interjected. She twirled her wand in her fingers, then gave it a flourish. The chicken took a step back from its corn, then turned a pale ginger and reshaped itself into a cat. Hermione frowned. Something wrong? Asked Harry. I wasn't aiming for a marmalade cat, she explained. Ginger, Ron corrected her. Cats will be cats, Ambrose reiterated with a wry smile. It looks rather like Jack. It looks a lot like Jack, Lydia corrected him. Apart from the star, of course. The cat sat back on the floor and looked around. It was long and lean, as Jacaranda had been, but had a small patch of white fur on its head, shaped like a star. It spat out a few grains of corn and glowered at them. I can't call him her, Lydia began. Ambrose peered at the cat closely and cocked his head to one side. Him, he pronounced. I can't call him Jacaranda, she continued. What shall we call him? How about Alexander? That rhymes with Jacaranda, Ambrose suggested. I'll call him Xander for short, Lydia decided. She bent down to the cat, and Xander leapt into her arms. They nuzzled each other. Ron cleared his throat. While we're together, I wanted to tell you all. I've decided to leave the Auras. A chorus of what and why came from the others. He turned to Hermione. I just think that the kids need a dad, not the memory of one. Nora's life can be risky. It's funny, I'm not frightened anymore. Not like I was when I started. I'm not frightened enough. And if you're going to be going into politics, they'll need me more often. Hermione was frowning, her head thrust forwards and her lips pursed. Her eyes had flicked towards Lydia when Ron had mentioned the kids needing a dad. Suddenly she relaxed, smiled, and then reached up and pulled his head down to kiss him. "Yes, Ron, yes," she agreed. "A wonderful idea, you wonderful man." "Right, what? Yes, great." The words tumbled out of him. "I don't suppose you could repeat that in front of Draco, could you?" "Quit while you're ahead, Weasley," she warned. "OK, well, could you give me a few weeks more while I arrange a replacement?" Harry asked. "Oh, of course, mate," Ron assured him. "There are cases I want to tie up before I leave." "What will you do?" Ambrose asked him. "Back to Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, of course," he smiled. "George still asks me every time I see him. It's where my heart belongs, or should belong. Family excluded, of course." Chapter 32. Epilogue. Ambrose waved to Lydia and her mother as the car slipped away down the street. He shut the door, returned to the living room, and settled into his armchair with a sigh. Xander the cat had not gone with Lydia, in deference to her mother's allergies. Instead, he slouched towards Ambrose, sprang lightly onto the arm of his chair, and looked into his eyes, his head tilted to one side. "Well, Jack, or should I say Xander, now," Ambrose began. "Lydia will be going to Hogwarts soon, and you are to accompany her. I expect you to behave yourself and look after her when she desperately needs it." The cat drew back his head and sat upright, looking affronted. "Of course I will," he replied. "It'll be great to be back at the old school again." The end.